Hi, and welcome to this FA Hot Topic. We are going to make the full recording available on the FA Learning's YouTube channel. It'll be put up in the next couple of days. So if there's any questions that arise from the presentation, that you can use the chat box tonight, and we'll also try to answer any questions that people might have in between tonight and the video going up. So we'll do our best to make sure that you get the full benefit from this FA Hot Topic webinar. It's my great pleasure to introduce my two co-presenters, Clare Daniels, who is a leading light within the girls program, particularly in the Wildcats program. And we've got Sally Needham, who's done some really groundbreaking work around the topics that we'll be discussing tonight. And my name's Pete Sturgess, and I lead on all things foundation phase within the Football Association. So welcome. A lot of you may be coaches, but this content and this topic is really relevant to anybody who works not just with young people, but with people in general. So we're going to have a deep dive into some of the issues that affect all of us in different ways. So welcome. We've got the objectives for tonight, and we've kept them quite short and concise. We're going to have a brief look at play and the benefits for child development, and also for us as football coaches, what that might mean for our session design, and particularly the way that we deliver those sessions. We're going to have a little look at the developing brain, and particularly how that links with a term that you may or may not have heard before, the seeking system, and how that links with play. And then we're going to look in general terms what it means to us as football coaches. So with that in mind, here's the first slide. It's a bit of a cryptic slide, but I'm going to ask Sally to give us a brief explanation as what this slide is about and how does it really relate to the things that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Thanks, Pete. So this is kind of a setting for, or a metaphor used to help us to kind of set the scene for tonight. And when we talk around Wembley, Wembley's a beautiful surface, and when Wembley has had a concert on or NFL, it gets downtrodden. And for that to then regrow, it's because of the amazing soil that's underneath and the care and nurture that the groundsmen do. They're really passionate about that grass coming back to fruition. So this is kind of an understanding of what we're going to look at. When we look and work with players or children, it's very much on the surface level, so grass level. We're going to look at probably some things that are going to sit below the surface tonight. And this also kind of helps to support or to understand how we can, as coaches, support that. So the fact that we can help. So if you think about the soil as like, and Mark Rivers says this about the container or this window of tolerance, so how much stress they've got in their system or what they can cope with, then it enables them, the grass, to bounce back into fruition. And also for us, if we've got players or children that have got really good stress response systems, they can be challenged more on the grass and cope more with life's ups and downs and setbacks. So that's kind of what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at the soil to really understand about the grass, and then how the soil kind of supports the grass at the same time. So we're using it as a metaphor really for it, to kind of understand where we're going with tonight's workshop.
So for my clarification, Sally, is the grass, the behaviours that you might see with the children that we coach, and the soil, is that what's actually going on that's out of their control but inside their body?
Yeah. So the grass is the child's behaviour, like you said, and also the grass represents what we're wanting to get out in our learning outcomes or our planning or our technical stuff. So that is what we see and what we're trying to get out, and their players' behaviours. And then below it is what's happening below the surface and how we're trying to develop that so they've got a greater capacity to cope with the things above the surface as well.
Okay. So if this was a classroom session, so all the coaches who have
Yeah.
done this tonight, we got them in a classroom. They might be feeling very different to how they might feel now in the comfort of their own home, receiving this information digitally. Is that right, Sal?
Yeah, for sure. So how we experience the world and how we experience how we feel, what we see, what we interpret it as ourselves is all come through our nervous system and things that's below the surface that's connected our brain with our bodies. So how we feel really is dependent on the environment and all of our experiences, and also how much we've got in our stress response system. So when you feel, when you're at a certain venue or you're playing a certain team, there'll be certain experiences that then come back to fruition because it's stored in our nervous system, in our brain. Things are out away from the surface that we can't control at subconscious level. So it's all to do with neuroception. But yeah, it's where we feel safe and state, and it all interlinks then into learning and how we process things, which we're going to go on to.
Yeah, and I think it's
so yeah.
If we're saying that, as adults, we can feel safe in some situations, but unsettled or a little bit, I'm going to use the word stress, a little bit more stressful in other situations, then if we're still feeling like that, how must some of the children be feeling at quite a much younger age who come to our various activities for the matches that we put on and the training sessions that we organise? This is happening with them with a system that is very immature in the development of the abilities that we've developed just by being adults.
Yeah, for sure. So the developing brain in a child and the developing in the nervous system will be underdeveloped or overstressed at such a young age, and only through a correlational approach by the connection with the coach and picking up on cues and triggers of safety, which is a relational approach with how we then are with our faces, what we say, what we put in a structure, will only help to kind of keep the child's stress response system from tipping. So we want a child to be in a really good state of safety, which basically is their social engagement system. So they're up for relationships, they're giving us eye contact, they're in a playful state, they're answering questions, they're problem solving, they're working as a team. And a lot of the stuff with the face is the face state gives a lot of implications of this, what state they're in. So it kind of gives you a lot of information back, and for us to notice that and to be able to help support the children and co-regulate and be there for them, we need to obviously be in a state of co-regulation as well. So we need to be in our social engagement as well.
Yeah, and I know we're going to come on to that a little bit later on, but I just want to bring Clare into it because Clare, as I mentioned at the beginning, has been instrumental in really developing the Wildcats program. And you've got almost an additional problem in that you're really trying to engage young girls who may not try football as their first choice. So if we're talking about providing safe and secure environments for them, you've got this additional issue that girls may not choose football straight away. So how has this affected your work, and how has it helped your work?
It has presented a very unique challenge. You don't often say that we have to help children to fall in love with the game. And their first experience when they come to a Wildcat session, for some children, even though they want to be there, you can tell by the fact they're fully attached to their parent, not looking at you, looking at the floor. Because there's no prior experience, there's nothing for them to have that safety from, that their stress response systems are off the wall. And that can be enough for them not to even, come back the following week. And we have the added dynamics of if you're starting the great game at, say, 9 or 10 years old, there's also no prior learning and experience of what a match is, the great part that gives the safety that the children love. For some kids, they they don't have that attachment or association. So the environments and the journey that the girls go on when they start Wildcats, if they are an absolute beginner, is very, very different. The utilization of play to provide that safety in the utmost, like the forefront of their learning, is very, very different until they start to fall in love with the game, and we can start tapering off imaginative play and environments that are right for the child, which may put the coach into an uncomfortable position, but it's the right thing for the child.
Yeah, so raising the awareness around the issues that we're going to talk about tonight is so very, very important right at the beginning of a young girl's engagement with the Wildcats program, and then the implications for the coaches or the adults who support that program. I think it could be a real benefit to that program if people really get to grips with the things we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, it's the relationships come first and football's second. And when that child is ready to move into our for competition strand, to join a team, that's when that dynamic shifts. But for us, it's the relationship between other children and the coach that is the number one thing. It's about making friends, having fun, and then playing football.
Yeah.
So we've had to completely switch it for the benefit of the child.
Yeah, and for very good reasons, as I think will emerge over the course of this presentation. Okay, so that's the preamble. That's a little introduction into some of the areas that we're going to look at tonight. I think the next thing I'm going to hand over to Sally, who's going to really add the next layer of information for us coaches to try and understand. So Sal, off you go.
Okay, so a pre kind of not warning, but a pre notification is the fact that fully aware that what I'm going to show you the model is not how the brain actually is set up structurally. This model is a model that is used to explain, to simplify it down, to help to explain it, and also this is the model I was trained in. It gets used by a man called Dan Siegel, that it helps to incorporate trauma into some training. So please just kind of notify that obviously we know that this is not how the brain is all interlinked, but it gives an insight into understanding what's below the surface, and it helps me to be able to explain it in instead of loads of really big words that I can't say. So first thing is your brain and your body is massively connected, and we bring into the table something through evolution from many years ago. And the bottom of our brain, in the sense of what the triune brain model shows, is that you've got a brain stem. Okay, and in that is three systems: loss, fear, and rage. And these are helpful sometimes and play to our advantage, and sometimes the disadvantage. And loss at the minute is probably something a lot of our children are going through, and we are. Loss of structure, loss of friends, loss of timetable, loss of playing football. And the fear element of when you go back, what's going to happen? What's my friends going to be like? Am I still going to be friends with them? So you've got loads of this stuff that's going off at the minute within the brain. And I put loss down, it's grief in a sense of the science, but this also is the thing that when sometimes we look at children and we think why they reacted the way that they've reacted, it's only they've only lost a game or they've lost a favourite pencil. It gives them a sense of safety. So when it's taken away, this overrides to give them a sense of keeping them safe, which, like I said, has advantages and disadvantages. The second part is your limbic system. And again, this has come from evolution. So these two parts are your strongest part of your brain, really, that keeps us safe. And in that, you've got your seeking and your play system. Play system is massively for getting us into a state of learning and social engagement, so up for relationships. It helps us to get us into a really good state, which I'm going to come on to in a bit, which is our social engagement system. Our seeking system is massive for children to follow through on life goals, to bounce back from setbacks, to add curiosity and motivation. So if a player or a child goes on to get a professional contract at 18, 16, and they are struggling to follow their S&C program, sometimes is it the child or is it the underdeveloped seeking system. So we have to look at what the behaviour is telling us, because sometimes it's what's ingrained in the system. Remembering these two are our most primitive parts of our brain that keep us safe. Our next part of our brain that's come through evolution that now makes us human is the fact that we have got our thinking capacity. And in that we can plan, we can reflect, we can say sorry, we can problem solve, and we can make decisions. We need our children and our players to be in all three parts of their brain to be able to play the game of football. So when we say to them, right, we're going to do loads of problem-solving activities tonight, if they are not in all three parts of their brain and in their nervous system, in their social engagement system, the learning is not taking place. They can't plan and reflect, because all they're doing is they are keeping themselves safe by their limbic system and brainstem taking over. And a way that I kind of try and explain this is the fact that if you've had an argument with somebody, and an hour later you start to calm down and you think, do you know when they said that? Why didn't I say that? Because you're not thinking, so you're just reacting. And we've seen this a couple of times with players when you can see the patterns of play and you think, why aren't they working that out? But because they're reacting, because they're not in three parts of their brain. And what links this to our nervous system is what's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve sits into our brainstem. It's done out of our conscious awareness, through neuroception. So it's taking up all the cues and triggers of safety from inside and outside the body. And it's getting us ready to either survive or to thrive, basically. And so this then links in to our heart, our breathing, our diaphragm, our gut, all through our body. So them sensations we get when we have a physiological reaction or a stress response reaction to certain environments, this is what's taking off. So I tell you this, and this I know it's complex, but it's trying to put in its most simplest form, is to understand that what's going off sometimes in our children's behaviours and what they then display, and also within us, sometimes out of our awareness and out of our control. The fact that if we don't feel safe, our body will display some behaviours that enables us to shut down our thinking, protect ourselves, and show some behaviours that then is sometimes advantage for us if we're in danger and life threat, or not if it's in a situation of, do you know what, I'm not really playing well today, so I'll send my knees hurting so I can get off this pitch. So that's kind of an element of the brain. It links into now what's called the Bagel Theory. So I'll just go on to that one for you. Sorry, I had to think. So this is the Polyvagal Theory. And just to state that, and this is our conversation we were having before we come on air, Polyvagal Theory got proposed in about 1994. And just because of the advances in science, we've now got to understand that this has kind of come out. It's only got delivered and presented from 2009, 2011. So it's really early in the fact of what we've learned because of the advances in science. It's really getting put into mental health, children's development, trauma, education. And for me, this is a preamble to anything to do with social attachment and social bonding. And what kind of sits and fits in everything as a core for every other discipline to be explained. And as I'm reading more about it and looking at other things, it sits the soil below the surface before anything we can understand anything else. So children and humans will have stuff outside and inside the body that's logged in their nervous system. Dan Siegel will say that from the moment you are conceived, there is a tape recorder that goes into your brain, and also how your skin evolves, that every experience is stored within your body. So things that sometimes are pre-verbal come out later on, or we sense things, or we smell things, or we hear things, and it triggers certain sensations. So it's all logged in our nervous system. And we've got different arrays of nervous system, but if we are in our social engagement system and we feel safe and we're up for relationships, this is the optimal level of human experience. This is what we want us, children, human beings, to be as much as we can in everyday life. so that we are regulating each other, we're calm, we're responsive, we're giving eye contact, and we are having correlational approaches, and we're picking up on cues and safety. If we don't, we go out of that state and we go into fight or flight response. We're defensive towards others, we're fearful, we're angry. So then bottom parts of our brain are taking over, shutting off thinking capacity, and we're just responding to what we feel. So it's our state and our bodies responding to keep us safe. And if not, then we go into life threat. Life threat, in a sense of immobilization, is on a massive spectrum. You have got the immobilization of, and we had it, I've had it a few times in halftime team talk when you're 5-6-0 down, and you have some players and you're talking to them and they will give you eye contact and they're nodding. That shows me they're in their social engagement system. I have some players that sometimes are just blank looked, their eyes are glazed over and there's nothing happening in their face. That shows me that they're in the really first stages of immobilization. All comes to do with your facial cues and triggers. So you've got the extreme of that when you are in severe danger, that your body puts you into that state of death. Obviously, we won't get that, but you've got immobilization. So when you have absent-mindedness with some children, there's definitely some immobilization within that, with their states. So this is just kind of to give you an insight into understanding that children's behaviours and how we are and what we notice is vitally important, and it's what drives their behaviour in the top. So this is all the soil stuff now, understanding what's below the surface, and then the behaviours that are on the top of the surface is the graph level. And it's our role and other people's role, if we can support and get as much soil in each child as possible, to help to put them back into social engagement as much as they can on cues and triggers. So that's a bit of the science. I don't know if it's blown, but sorry.
No, I think we can help the coaches listening in just to begin to understand this. So from the model that's on the slides at the moment, that life threat, if we go back to the brain, that's the reptilian part of the brain. And reptiles develop this ability to feign death, to really reduce their life-saving systems, need less oxygen, need less food, in an attempt to survive. This was the most ancient and primitive of those stress response systems. The danger one, the fight flight, is more about that limbic brain.
Yeah.
As we develop more towards the mammals and the people that we are today, and that really grabbed that fight flight and said, right, if we're in danger, our first reaction is to just run away. The safety bit, the green one, is that neocortex, that higher levels of the brain where all the understanding and learning takes place. And for the coaches, is it right, Sally, that if you go from that green into the fight and flight response, or heaven forbid into the life threat, that all learning stops, and you will be able to pick up the cues and the triggers from the children that you're with if any of these things are happening?
Yeah. So if a child's not in their social engagement system, there's no learning taking place. So that's the same with adults, with anything. So if a child's gone into danger or life threat, by us noticing it and by showing signs of safety, we can help support them back into that social engagement system. It's a fine line in the sense of where they are, but the face really says it all for them. And it's that noticing that and being aware of that, and then the language that we use to help support them back in. So if you notice in the limbic system, when we validate and attune to behaviours and to noticing things, we're helping to support them to come back into co-regulation. If we just go, are you listening to me? I'm talking to you, we're 4-0 down. Then all we're doing is we're hitting them parts of their brain again. So they're picking up on our facial cues, our tone, our bodily function. So our voice and how we express things is vitally important for helping to support and back into the social engagement system. But we've got to So we've got to be in our social engagement system as well to notice that, or we'll just drive through sessions and we'll go, can't remember much about that session.
Yeah, it's a great point. And on the slide before with the brain, the last part that appeared was that vagus nerve. And it's important for the coaches to understand, because on the chat, William has mentioned, is it a bit like the butterflies in your tummy? And 80% of the nerves of the vagus system, or the vagus nerve, they're what's called afferent nerves. So they send back sensory information from your vital organs back to your brain. And it does that automatically. You're not going to be able to control it. So it's all right saying to the kids, pull yourself together, but it's completely out of their control.
And that's really...
And also, sorry, Claire.
I was going to say, and that's really important, and we see that a lot in Wildcats, and encourage the coaches to say it's okay that you're feeling nervous. I feel nervous too when I go to something new. So immediately you're affirming that behaviour, that it's okay to be feeling that way.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I think that's a big... I think that's the big thing. When you say around my gut feeling and you meet somebody for the first time and you go, I'm not right sure, I don't really like them, I don't know why. It's your neuroception and the stuff that's below the surface that's giving you alert, and you can't control that. Same as when you walk into a restaurant, you'll have a favourite, you'll sit at a certain table. It's like, it makes me laugh about when you go into somewhere and the people will move the dirty cups off a table onto the clean table because they want to sit there because they feel the most safe. And it is massively, and the language that we use is about that. And we've got into this world now of, and this is a big thing for me, is we've got in this world now of bad and good. There's bad emotions, there's good emotions. There's feelings and emotions, and it's on a continuum. And to experience stress and anxiety, you've got to experience joy and love. And understanding that children, especially boys, will experience all these rave emotions, and you expect them. And if you were to put it in an adult context, so you're going on your A license on Monday, you'd be nervous and worried. So if you put the context of the child, just because we've got more life experience, we don't see it as as big a thing. But if you put it in the context of the child, it's a big thing to them, and acknowledging their feelings and also our feelings is massive to being able to naming them. So the younger children don't have names associated to the feelings and sensations. So as coaches and as parents, actually explaining that naming and feeling of where is it? When I get nervous, it's in my belly or my legs start to tingle. It's massive. Understand it's what's in below the surface, where we've come to a point where stress and anxiety is bad. And it's not bad. It's when you're in a prolonged state of the chemicals that produce. But actually feeling that joy and feeling that sadness and that anxiety and fear, it's being human.
Yeah.
And it's feeling it and expressing it, and then being able to understand it and process it. And that's what then starts to develop all the stuff that's below the surface, to be able to cope with a cup final that's coming up, or being called up to England camp, or going to your first Wildcat session.
Brilliant. And I think what you've touched on there, both of you, Claire and Sally, is that we're trying to apply this to football, but this is just about what might be considered great practice or great knowledge and understanding to apply to all of the people and the young children that we work with, because we'll all be experiencing this and it's all out of our control. It's just that as you get older, you develop ways to either cope with it really well or don't cope with it very well, but we're able to hide it.
Yeah, and that's sometimes healthy ways and unhealthy ways of coping with it. Exactly. So in relationships later on, you have healthy ways and unhealthy ways of coping with it that might cause some rupture and repair in some relationships. And that's, but if we add more understanding and validation and attunement with a younger age group, their developing brains will hopefully help support this.
Yeah.
Especially within the boys, and they've got to be able to understand and catch the emotion to be able to then be in all three parts to make a good decision. Football's a decision-making sport.
Yeah, we've got got Simon who's asked he's made a comment on the chat about they're trying to get a Wildcat session going in Hastings. So from the things we've talked about so far, Claire, if Simon was setting this up and let's just say he brought the parents in of the young girls that were going to attend, what kind of things would you be saying to the parents and for any adults who are supporting the program? What would be the key information that you'd begin to communicate out to them?
The first thing, if it's their first ever attendance at any sort of footballing session, is to make them aware that their child may really want to go, but the closer they get to going to the session, the walk, it's almost the equivalent for this child of one of our England players walking to take a penalty kick in the World Cup final. Their legs get heavy, they get the butterflies in their stomach, and they start to internalize. And the best and most, I guess, way for coaches to try and empathize with that is being asked to sing karaoke in front of 100,000 people or even 10 people. It's pure vulnerability on the part of the child with no way or prior experiences to balance it on. So things like building a routine, telling them before they come what's going to happen. So you will be asked to, you'll walk in with mum and dad. Mum and dad will, or mum or dad or your guardian will sign you in. And then as a coach, taking them through the journey. So today we're going to do this, followed by this, and this is what we're going to finish with. So we've given them some structure. But I guess, Pete, the main difference with Wildcats is some of these girls don't even know what 4v4 game looks like or the emotions they're supposed to be experiencing in them. So things that we as coaches take for granted, that scoring a goal actually, feels good, we might actually have to start helping them learn the connected emotions with certain parts of the game. So they will look at you because they don't know what they're supposed to be experiencing. The first time they score a goal, you'll be like cheering and they'll look at you almost perplexed in terms of, okay, the coach seems happy and I don't have any prior experience to link onto that. Or they'll utilize and learn off their peers who do have maybe experience of playing football and look at them and look at their reactions and start to mirror and copy. But it's really important that as facilitators of these sessions that we start, as Sally and yourself have alluded to, attaching emotions and feelings with different parts of the game. And I'm sure everybody's had it where you're teaching a new part of a practice in a way that's right for the children, but one at some point will walk off or they'll storm off, they'll sit down and they'll cry, and that's okay as well. But it's talking through those emotions, talking about the way they're feeling and why they're feeling in that way. And when you are in something that's very new and you don't have prior experience, frustration can build up really quickly. One, because you might not understand at all what's being asked of you, the language being used, or the assumptions that we know that, if we score an X and a Y and X dribbles round Y, as adults, we know what that looks like. But for someone that's brand new into a game, they don't. And that's enough to just push them into that danger situation. Likewise, if they're turning up with no friends, Pete, they're already at a danger before you've even got them on a pitch.
It's a great thing, but I think we can look at this in two ways, Claire. We can look at this as a real issue, and we've got to deal with all these issues, and it's overwhelming, and we'll never get the Wildcats program off the ground. But for me, I think you've got a unique opportunity to create an environment that embraces everything we're speaking about today. And I think that will be the platform for the development of greater participation and great enjoyment for young girls who want to try football. So I actually see it as a really positive, but the implications for you and your key messages out to the program must begin to embrace some of the things we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this is where we would lead onto the idea of play and what do we actually mean by play. I think so many people would hear that term and immediately think play the game, play the match, when really that's just one facet of something that embodies such a wide ranging variety of different types of play, all of which fundamentally support each child's development. And if we can start to understand and build different types of play. So we think about solitary play and we think that's a bad thing, but it's not, because that's that bit of, the soil that Sally was alluding to. If a child's in a state of solitary play, but they feel safe and they're learning, is that a bad thing? No, it's just a marker for us in terms of where they're at. We might see in 3, 4, 5 weeks time they've progressed on to collaborative and cooperative play, and I guess that's the uniqueness of what we try and utilize in Wildcats is storytelling, imaginative play, just to give that safety and the setting for the child, because that's what this is about, giving them the safety so they can learn and fall in love with the game.
Yeah, we've on the chat we've got Dan, who talks about one of the issues for us as coaches is if we've got 15 children or 15 players in our squad, in theory they could all be feeling in a different way, and their stress responses could all be at varying levels of either hypersensitivity or readiness to run away, or some might be beginning to be shut down, and yet others are absolutely totally engaged and ready for the next bit. How do we ever manage that?
Is that me?
I was going to go for it, but Sal, go for it.
I need the answer.
No, go Claire. Go Claire.
I think for me, that's when you start having check-ins with your players, your children, and you start to develop relationships with them. So the first time you meet a child, you're not gonna know who they are, or what makes them tick, how they react when they're given a challenge that's too hard. That's information you can get from their parents and guardians. They know that child intimate, inside out, back to front. So if you've got something tonight that's going to be a bit tricky, and potentially how each player is going to react, you've already got a strategy in place. But you can also tee it up with the children and say, we're going to try something tonight and it's going to be a bit hard. And some of you might feel frustrated. Some of you might feel cross, but some of you might really want to enjoy it, and that's okay. So straight away, just making them the emotional response to the challenge. Okay. And it's not easy to do it with 15 players. It's not, because everybody's so different. Yeah.
Sally, anything from you?
I think Claire made some great points. I think for me, there's certain things that we can put as in a structure as our planning to create an environment that would be the best possible way of putting them into their social engagement system. So that's kind of going to come later on in the presentation, but there's certain things we can really do as a coach that is structurally there that allows them to engage in their social engagement system, which then allows for more creativity and more curiosity within the session and pro-social behaviours. And Claire touched on a few things, like the check-ins, the acknowledgement of feelings and emotions. And there's a few things, obviously, that we're going to come on to that. For me, I think if we understood the value of it and why we do it, and we put it into our sessions, and then you take it out of it, you'll notice the difference. And then you can kind of get them into a state ready to learn. And if they are not in that state and they've not had a little bit of play to get them into that state of learning, then that's what gets them ready. So you're doing some stuff like before they even get into the session, that you're getting them into that readiness of that state to really have a massive effect on their learning, their pro-social behaviours with other children and yourselves, which is building self-regulation and resilience and everything else that's in that. So there's a way to kind of create an environment, and that's kind of like why I've gone down the route I did, because we talk around creating this environment in the role of the coach and in relationships, but I want to know the how and the why, and this is what gives you the how and the why, to understand actually why we do certain things. You'll see it by responses of the players. So I think then that if you know the science behind it, it's a kind of this is kind of what it is.
Yeah, I think what this is going to lead to, Sally, in an ideal world, is more understanding coaches, more coaches who have a better radar for those emotional roller coasters that children obviously come with, and we're better equipped to deal with it. I'm going to move on to the next slide because Claire mentioned earlier about play and how important that is for our children. I think part of the issue tonight is to try to unpick the difference between play in its purest sense and play and what it might look like in our coaching sessions. Would you have anything to add to that, either Sally or Claire?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think we take for granted that play happens, and you think back to when you were a child and the way in which you used to play outside of school, probably games like Kirby, Dens, cycling, World Cup, just free flow like games that were owned and led by the children, and it would be all around you, but it would go unnoticed. And it isn't until those things are gone that you start to notice that play doesn't exist. But play gives people such a positive emotional response. It happens intrinsically. It's driven by individuals. And when you get it in the right zone, kids and adults can stay in a state of pure just love of what they're doing. They're challenged. The challenge is perfect for where they're at in their own learning and development, and they don't want to stop. You would hear like footballers talk all the time about, I'd be playing out and the only reason I come back in is because I was hungry. So a different psychological need drives them back inside rather than the game itself. And I think it's important to know that when we talk play, we're not just talking about a match. We're talking about an experience, an emotion, and different formats and interactions with people help you learn about the world around you. And you do that through relationships, experiences, and the game of football.
Yeah, I think what happens when you're playing is that, and Sally will build on this in a moment, that your seeking system kicks in, and your seeking system is designed really to motivate you towards certain actions and behaviors and attitudes to accomplishing things. And it really does feed that need to explore and to experiment and to find out how things work. So I think it's not just, well, it is the social engagement system, but it's also this ability that is really primitive. The seeking system relates to all of your ancestors and their desire to really go over the next hill, go to the next valley, climb the next mountain. We've still got that seeking system within us. And for young children and us as adults, it comes out when we're allowed to play. Would you agree, Sally?
Yeah, and it comes out when we're allowed to play. It comes out when we have somebody that is with us to express emotions and to help support that. It also comes out in purposefulness in life. So if you look at now, people say to me, how do you activate the seeking system? Well, sometimes it's through what we give them. Sometimes it's through what we are with them. And sometimes it's what gives them purpose. So if you look at Marcus Rashford at the minute, as an adult, he's really engaging and striving and developing his seeking system, because he wants drive and a motivation that is coming around children with free school meals. So he's as an adult activating it. As children, we have a duty to help and support that activation, and also support them in that seeking system, because a lot of children that, I don't know, just saying, but some behaviours that come later on in life when they don't finish the projects, or we don't follow through on life dreams, is probably an underdeveloped seeking system. So it's a real element of understanding what's below the surface, because we sometimes disregard or we label children, and especially then adults later on, that they are this way or they're that way. And laziness, if you look at it through a neuroscience lens, could be just the fact that there's a fear of risk of failure. You could do the fact that, you know, laziness is that they've undeveloped seeking system. There's always a driver on a behaviour. And I think we've got to understand that what that is, because like you've explained, we've got a real innate elements of stuff in our systems, male and female, children and adults, that we've got a play system, and our play looks slightly different to a child's system. But our seeking system's what drives our motivations.
Yeah.
So
and we want to try to access that as much as possible in the way that we work with our players. Couple of comments from the chat is that Dan's commented again that I know that a lot of the stuff we're talking about, if people have just joined us, they might be thinking, I thought this was about football. And we have to make the distinction that we are not asking coaches to become child psychologists or, you know, neuroscientists. We're not. And we're just trying to raise some of the issues that if we have a slightly deeper understanding about the emotional responses, that some of the things that we might do with the best intentions, that can have, you know, a negative effect on some children. One of the other coaches, Sally, William has also said his approach is about getting to know the child before you let the child know the game. And I think we had this through the youth modules where we said, look, in order for you to teach football to John, you've not only got to know football, but you've got to know a little bit more about John. And I think that's really important. Sorry, Sally.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, Pete, that you've got to think about it in this way. This theory and this concept and understanding of this is only just, like I said earlier, only just starting to come out. It's starting to go into education. So primary school teachers are now starting to get modules on this element of understanding this systems, this knowledge. It's only just been transferred into education. It's only just, if you was to foster and adopt, you get training on this. You get an understanding of this for behaviours and what happens to children. If you work with children that's got trauma or in child psychology, you get to understand this. But we're all in a world of that we could do better at just understanding this as human beings. Yeah. And I think we're not saying you've got to be a child psychologist to be in the football, but actually for us to understand human development and the gains that it is, and, you know, Sarah Blakemore, who's one of the leaders in neuroscience, will say it's fundamental to teaching and learning. It's also fundamental for just our own human experience as a coach and for the development of children. So I get that it's a new concept, but it's a new concept in every field. And I ran a conference a few weeks ago with education, and they're really starting to push this stuff in education because they're realising that it could really help support the children. It could really help support the teachers. Yeah. Understanding of understanding of the science behind it, because it then helps to know that it's not them and it's not you. And sometimes what their actions are evokes a certain emotion in us. It's not the children, it's why we perceive that action to be and what the emotion evokes in us. So, yeah.
Yeah, Chris.
Shall we move on?
Sorry, Sal. I'm going just before I move on. Chris has made a good point on the chat about, and it brings all the things that you've just said together. We're not asking coaches to be psychologists, but what we're asking them to do is understand the importance of relationships, understand the importance of connecting with the children, and building those trusting and really safe and secure relationships based on the fact that all of this is happening under the soil, and we've got to look for the signals in the turf, you know, which is obviously the behaviours we see in the children. I think if coaches leave tonight thinking, actually, that's either provoked me to go and find out more, or I get it a little bit, and emotions and empathy and attunement is really important, they're going to be in a better place anyway. So we better move on, otherwise this will be a 3-hour recording. Sorry.
So talking around like application, this is one of the things I spoke around. So arrival activity, and I'll go on to the science behind arrival activity, how it actually helps us get in social engagement states. The timetable and structure and rights. It's timetable children to understand or to have some calmness within the state that they're coming to understand what's coming. So one of the things is around the structure board. So when children arrive, if they've got a structure board outlining what's happening tonight, it helps them to feel a state of calmness, which kind of stops the things of what we're doing tonight, what we're doing after that session, are we playing at weekend, what colours have we got in your bibs tonight, where am I going to put this, where about my mum, what time's my mum coming back? So an understanding of that, and I would say this is massive on COVID coming back. So understanding that what they're going to expect when they come back, because certain children will need to understand what's coming for certainty to be able to be in that state. So this is a little stage video that me and Sturgess did when we was doing some filming for Foundation-Based DNA, but it gives you an insight in how to apply it. And this is just 3 little bits that you can do as your children are arriving, your players are arriving, that starts to get them into that social engagement state. So hopefully we'll see it, but excuse the Barnsley tones.
Are we all right, boys? Perfect. All right, so today you've just done your bit of your arrival activity, all right, which was on the board at the back. We're going to do a little bit on Skills Master. We're going to do some skills games, all right? Then we've got Stay on the Pitch game. Then we're going to have a normal game, and then it's home time. Is that all right? Remember, I've got my rights up on the board there, all right? So everybody's got the right when you're here to be safe, to learn and to have respect. And any time that you feel that you maybe are getting frustrated with a game or you need a little bit of a time in, then you know the yellow box, come and have a little stand in there and I'll come and help you out. Is that okay? Yeah, at any point you've got your drink station up there, all right? Happy? Let's get going then.
Nope. All right, so here we go, the arrival activities. So arrival activities is in a sense of creating, research shows us 10 to 15 minutes of an arrival activity helps children to get into a state readiness to learn. Like I said, we're in a conference with Stephen Porges, who's the Polyvagal Theory man, a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, it enables them to get into a state to learn. They're more ready to learn. Their learning period is more extended. The arrival activity gives us time to set up. We've got an innate need to play, so it attaches that. When children come that have had wet play, they're a little bit more tipping on the edge of their dysregulation, because where they've not had the natural urge to play through the day. It gives them emotional and social benefits, as Claire said, with negotiating, with playing for pro-social behaviours. The massive thing for an arrival activity, it enables us to have a little bit of a sensing. So 15 minutes of them choosing and doing something they want, getting them into that state of engagement, increases learning, reduces behaviour, and it gives us time to have that breathing space, because normally we'll have run from work or parents will be coming to us. And for us to be able to give them back on their cues and safety and trigger, we need to be in our social engagement systems too. So it's a massive thing for an arrival activity. There's also the seeking system bit, which Sturgess has already touched on, that it helps with all these amazing things that we do. And the biggest thing that enables the seeking system to be activated is play. Also, language that we use and hitting the limbic system, and I saw it come up on the text box. The empathy and the attunement and validation is massive in the seeking system and the care system. It builds the connection between us and the coach. It shows that they care. It shows that they're going to be there for us. It shows that they're there if we need them, that they're going to help us out. And that's massive for activating the seeking system as well. So I don't know if any of you want to jump in on that, but
I think if
are you all right? We're moving on.
No, if the coaches came on tonight thinking, I need some practical tips, I think what you've outlined for the beginning of your session is perfect. So I think everybody can take that model and put it into their own context. But the key message is that we are trying to give the young people who come the best possible start and get them as quickly as we can into that learning habit and that learning zone, so that we open up all those pathways to that higher order brain.
Exactly. And as you hear, once you stimulate curiosity in a child, you'll then, as a result, get more experimentation, which subsequently gives more creativity, which is obviously one of the main end products that we want from football. And that then just leads furthermore into extended play. And it becomes a cyclical process just from the way you stimulate the brain at the start.
Yeah. So if we're asking coaches to look at their methodology, beginning to integrate some of these ideas into the way that they work with their children is a great way, because it's going to press lots and lots of positive buttons with the children.
Yeah, and it's also going to help us develop as coaches, because we're going to be able to see things in the session, plan and reflect for our next session, and also give us a better experiences of being in relationships with the kids. So it's just an all-round thing of more enjoyable, better human experience. So it's and this is not going to happen all the time, and there'll be dysregulation. It's when we're only human as self, but it's something that the more we're aware of, the more that we can actually help support the soil and the grass. Yeah. And that's a big thing for me. The biggest thing for me as well is you've mentioned about the role of the coach. And the practicality of this, in a sense of the social engagement system, is massive for how we, connect with the kids. So personal greetings is something I've done a little bit of research in, which, around personal greetings in education is having some massive impact at the minute, in a sense of learning's going down, behaviour's going up, and there's a share of power. And that's really important within when we're coaching boys as well, because boys sometimes get stuck in their repair of a rupture and repairing a relationship. So a personal greeting is something that really has a massive power, and a choice within that is really good, because some children don't want to have bodily touch because of trauma or how they're feeling out of their social engagement. And that's massive, in an understanding of that as a child as well. And there's massive around being present. So the sense of sensing in and being present with a child and with the group and being in it together. And Claire mentioned about the check-ins, and I said about off air, within every meeting that I would have a check-in. So you bring people into the present, because to be in the present, they've got to be in all three parts of their brain and regulated. Same with caring, showing that we care, showing that, the change of languages when a child cries is sometimes we go, oh, calm down. But actually, when we said to them, I can see it's really hard for you, and Claire mentioned a lot of language earlier, and am I going to help you with this? Hits the limbic part of the system, and also helps them to regulate, and also helps them to know that it's understanding. We've got empathy and understanding, and we've all been there when we've gone to somebody that we know and we've been misattuned, and we think we're right, and it just opens up some defensive behaviours, and we're trying to really down-regulate defensive behaviours and up-regulate more social engagement, because that's what's better in relationships and learning and enjoyment and everything else. And I think the biggest thing for me is around your face. And your social engagement system is massively in your face. There's loads of research around Botox with children misinterpreting social engagement system. And it all comes from your facial cues and triggers. And this is where we can read it on other people. And so it's massive to understand the fact that the tone of your voice, how your eyes are interacting, your smile. And there's at the end of the presentation, there's a further reading thing, and there's a strategy on Edutopia around education, and that's some real research around the personal greetings and the face elements of the teacher, with how it's had an impact on the classroom. So yeah, the role of the coach for me is a massive thing.
Super. And I think in this video we'll see an example of this where I won't preempt it. We'll let the coaches watch this.
Keep it on. Good. Well done. Oh! You're off, you're back on. Good effort though, that. Good effort, I like that. Goalie, get the ball. Goalie, we all right? Has it hit you at nose? Wait a minute, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh. Has it hit your nose? Or did it hit your face? Did it hit your nose or your face?
No.
Your nose, it really hurts that, doesn't it, when it hits your nose? It's not funny, is it, when it hits your nose? It's not funny. Are you okay? Really hurts, doesn't it? I know. It's not nice, is it, when it hits your nose?
Does he want to come off?
I don't know, we'll ask him in a second. It really makes your eyes sting, doesn't it?
Coram doesn't really care.
It hurts, doesn't it, darling? Are you okay?
You haven't got a nosebleed.
You haven't got a nosebleed, but are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really hurts, I know it does. Well done.
Okay. Okay. Go,
Well done, Keeps. Keeper's ball it is. We've got a red off.
Just some things on that. Obviously,
Go on then,
well,
Sally. Coaches want tips and wrinkles. Yeah, what was going on then?
so a couple of things. Obviously, we expect sometimes goalkeepers just to get on with it when then we expect them to pull a worldie save off, and they've got so many cues and triggers that's going off in front of them. So we'd only just got to know them children because we were literally got from filming. But the thing for me is around remodeling behaviours. So we model behaviours, we're on their level, which, you know, we all know, but then our faces and cues and voice links into what they're feeling and expressing. It's not my job to sense in or to express what I think that child should be feeling. I've got to notice and see what that child's feeling. And then they know that I'm reciprocating and I'm attuned and validated to what they're experiencing. And the thing is a couple of the players, it were interesting, said they want to come off, and that's our initial exercise to get them off the field. But actually to help them and support them where there's had the accident or they're feeling a little bit dysregulated, helps to then recover that and also gives them a positive experience. It's interesting the player at the end went to give him a tap on the back. So he's gone back into pro-social behaviour. So he's giving him signs and cues and triggers to help him get back into his 3 parts of the brain. And that's the same with me when I pushed him back towards the goal. I gave him a little bit of safe touch on the back to give him some dopamine. So I'm giving him signs of cues and triggers. The other players were around him giving him signs of cues and triggers. So we can regulate him together back into his social engagement system in all 3 parts of his brain, because within 5 seconds we could ask that goalkeeper to make a worldie save. Yeah. So validating and tuning is something that, and taking the time to do that, that goalkeeper knows that I'll be there next time. And then the next time after that, or the next time after that, just literally need to look at me. I'd give him a little bit of a smile or a thumbs up, and then he's started. But if I don't start building that process, and some children will take 100 times for me to go on, some children will only take 10. And that's the thing, we've got to keep going and going and going and going until they don't need us anymore. Yeah. It's not about being clingy or being overdoing it. That's what's in their nervous system that we sometimes have to keep going back and going back and going back. And some children will need a couple of times. Some children will need a lot more times. But that's not the child's fault. It's what's underneath the surface. Yeah.
But the outcome that we're all looking for is the child being able to self-regulate and almost bring themselves back into that state of learning and being in the right place. And I think we perhaps have a culture of, well, we've got to toughen them up. But I think we need to rephrase that. We have to help the children develop the skills so that they can self-regulate and almost be able to toughen themselves up, because as soon as they feel in a particular way, they've got the skills and capabilities to bring them back into the present.
Yeah, and team sports and play through co-regulation's massive for developing self-regulation and resilience.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important just to flag that those skills that we're developing in team sports, they're not isolated and only used in a team sport environment. They're used for the whole of life. So when math tests get a bit hard or an English test gets a little hard, they can draw back on those experiences and it helps them in their everyday life. So we're not creating football players. We're helping to develop the whole child.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And also,
I'm glad you've made it. Yeah,
and also, Claire, if you think about if we're developing players, we're developing later on players, if they go onto our England squads or whatever, to have more, being able to cope with more stresses, to being able to cope with more setbacks, to be able to self-regulate more, which means they are literally problem solving and decision makers, which that's what we need. We need decision makers and problem solvers that are scanning, that are planning, reflecting, that are up for social behaviours, that sees a teammate that's struggling, that's able to self-regulate before a penalty or a free kick, and so be able to cope with setbacks. And that's kind of then the development stage later on, the performance.
yeah.
And I think that.
Go on, Claire.
I was going to say, and I think across that entire journey, what we're talking about is giving the child a voice. They're having the autonomy, the ownership on their footballing experience. It's not ours. We've had our turn. It's theirs. And if they go through a process where they're at the heart of the learning, where they feel that they're owning, the steps and the experiences, if they eventually have children and become back into the system as a coach, they're more likely to replicate those behaviors with the young children that then become part of their care. So we're creating like an experiential cycle for the future.
Yeah, and I think that we're in such a privileged position in working with quite young children that we can give them such a positive start because we are so in tune with what's going on with them, and we're becoming more highly skilled in order to maximize the development when they're with us, as in football as well as in that social and emotional development.
Definitely.
So
yeah.
Do you want to read that, Sally?
Yeah, so we talk around on our session planning, especially on level 2 and things, around planning some of the things before the player gets the ball on it and after. So these are my little kind of top tips, things to consider, in a sense of before, when the children are arriving or players are arriving, a personal greeting to each child, name. A name's a massive thing for children, and we'll probably get it if we have an email that spells our name wrong or somebody says our name wrong. It evokes an emotion in us, and parents take a lot of time to decide names, and it gives us identity. So when somebody gets us our name wrong, it misattunes to us and evokes some emotions. So a personal greeting to show that's you're recognizing them as an individual is massive. Structure board and rights, I know Matt's put in the text box as well. A lot of coaches that I've kind of banged onto about structure board and rights I said to me, I said, right, take away a week and then put it back. And the children do ask for it. So some will come into the session and check on it, and some don't need it. And the rights are there for the fact that we've got boundaries. Children need some kind of boundaries and some structure to create that safety and to feel safe with you. And, if a child's swinging on a goalpost and we say, get down, there's no consequence, there's no reaction to it. So it's a case of, is that right? Is then rights to feel safe? Is that safe? No. Okay, remember our rights. So you've got boundaries and you've got something to come back onto. An arrival activity, like I said, we've touched on loads. So for me, those three things, if you put them in before they actually started the session, it should hopefully get them into their social engagement system and notice things. And then you've got things through the session. So a check-in, like Claire said. Children sometimes don't want to give you the feeling. So a weather, how are we feeling today with weather, colours? You know what's going to come from a certain colour or a certain weather without actually asking them. And what I would notice then is, where do I need to stand? I can let some children go and I can go and stand next to them, because children will regulate physiologically from people they're connected with, and they don't need to be actually sat with them. So little children will run off and then come back and sit on mum or dad or whoever caregiver's knee is, and then go back on. So they're self-regulating, they're refueling. And then we've got to, whatever session we've got, think around play activities and getting them into that engagement system and noticing what's happening with them, when they're bored, when they're not. And then we notice behaviours of what's happening in the session. So when's that happen? When doesn't it happen? And I get asked a lot about, well, when you bring them in and there's them children that want to ask loads of questions, yeah, you know what, because they've probably had really good experiences and they probably want to answer the questions and they're really wanting to get into relation with you. They're wanting to be attached to you. Then you've got the other ones that don't. So sometimes we'll say to them, what do you think? And if they don't want to give us answers, there's maybe having a negative experience or they're not in their social engagement system, so they can't think of the answer. You go, you know, what team do you want to be on? So we have to think around noticing that stuff and looking at it through a different lens. And if we then can support behaviours through, you're really developing some of the resilience and self-regulation through it. And then after the session, a check-in about emotions and feelings, and also the understanding of the learning and a deep sense of learning. So the questions that we ask, if they've had a deep sense and they've been in their thinking capacity, you'll be able to get some really good answers back. If not, sometimes they will just regurgitate some words or give you what you think you want to hear, and we'll just go, yeah, that's fine, go. And then a personal greeting, a checkout. So we have a circle, same as when children at the minute haven't had like an end of school or the transition from secondary school to primary school to secondary school. You need an end point of closure. So then you're closing things down to move on to the next thing. And that's when sometimes if the coach just leaves, they've not had an end point, and it sometimes does affect some children. So this is just something to consider that enables you to think around your planning for you as a coach, for actually what you can put into your session to create as much social engagement and create as much of a safe state that hopefully your then children will be in it, and then we just notice it and help support them through it. But this enables us as well to really sometimes challenge them more on the grass in what session we do. And if we say, oh, we're going to problem solve or we're going to have really hard decisions today, well, they need to be in this state for that learning to take place and for pro-social behaviours that is massive in team sports and play.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of just like some simple things to think about in application.
Brilliant. That's really clear, Sally, and something that we can all, benefit from, knowing that there's a whole lot of research and science behind this within those very simple messages. And I think if coaches are listening in thinking, well, this has got nothing to do with football, for me, it's got everything to do with football, because we want that learning and focus and understanding to be around football and how they can develop better as players. So the more often we can take them into that learning zone by some of the strategies that we can deploy, I think it's dynamite, really. So we're coming to the end of our webinar now. As I said at the beginning, it's obviously being recorded and it'll be up on the FA Learning YouTube channel so that you can watch again, because we have thrown a lot at you. And if there are any questions, there's a facility where we can get back to you with those questions. If you suddenly think about something tomorrow, you think, I wish I'd have asked that. But I think we've pretty much touched on a lot of the things that were coming up in the chat. Is there any last messages from you, Claire, that we can leave the coaches with?
I think it's just to remember to enjoy what you're doing and the reason why you're doing it. I think you started the webinar by talking and introducing Sally and I as people that love looking at how we can give the best experience for young children. And I'm sure that sentiment is shared with everybody that's listening in. And if you can take one thing away that helps you to help a child or help your session go a little bit different, or a little bit, there's a new part for you that you didn't have last week, then the time you've given up now to listen and take on new information was worth it. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is looking to give these children the best experience of the game that we all love.
Sally, I know you've put this reading list together.
Yeah, I think Tim's just put a great point in the comment box. And I think for me, we're talking tonight about young players and giving that experience so that they fall in love with the game and we start them off in such a massive capacity. So for me, the foundation for prevention is massive prevention work. But yeah, we've all got the same elements of stuff in our brain, and the nervous system is the same. It's just what we carry with us as experience. So for me, if you're working with older players, open age, elite players, the science is the science. And if we're wanting to get them into understanding and learning the game and understand about processing, planning, reflecting to be a better performer, then the science is the science, no matter what you look at, whether it's children or it's adults or it's elite players. The thing is, as well, is for me, is like Claire mentioned and we've mentioned tonight, within anything of this processes, if we can, and I keep saying it, just down-regulate ideas and promote some more social behaviours and everybody's more social in their social engagement system, we're going to have a massive impact on the wider society, on life skills, on learning, and fundamentally is value to teaching and learning. So whether you're teaching or you're tutoring or whatever you're doing, the science is the science. And I think this is starting now to come to fruition a little bit more, like I said, and I just hope that it will help to as well for coaches to understand and give a little bit, not more patience, because I won't say that all coaches don't, but a little bit of an understanding of why children and why we behave the way we do. And yeah, this is further reading. I mean, the one more for children, adolescents one, I would definitely go and look at Professor Sarah Jane Blakemore. She's the leader in the adolescent's brain, and that's a whole different topic and ball game. The one, if you are looking at boys, the one that absolutely has just stuck with me lately is that Dr. Michael Reichardt, around how through stereotypes we work with boys. You know, and I was at my birthing party for my friend a few weeks ago, and having a bit of complications, and both the midwives come in, a male and female, and just went, typical boy already. So experience of even in the womb is stereotype for a typical boy. And, you know, you want to go look at primary school, and he talks massively about how we stereotype boys have infiltrated our playing fields and as classrooms. And I think it's massive. I think understanding that their kit is just as much as our kit, same in structure. It's the understanding of them, how we perceive that to be with them. And it's only got to show by mental health stats later on. So there's loads of stuff to get your kind of teeth into that. And it's just tonight really about evoking some curiosity. But Edutopia's got some real insight into putting some of this stuff into education. And it's definitely getting looked at in education. So why not get looked at in sport? I mean, it's touching now in sport, but not much in sport.
Brilliant. And I think this is where Sally and Claire are really like trailblazing this approach within football. So a massive thanks to you both. And I think what we've tried to do with this reading list is to really tap into all the coaches' seeking system so that they'll go away from here and really, you know, try to find out more about this. Because I think, like Sally says, it's got huge potential to begin to change not just our coaching sessions and the way our young children play football, but in general terms and in wider terms, it's great for society if we can equip people with this kind of capacity and capability. So thanks to you both. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning from you both, and I hope the coaches, you know, feel the same. We're getting some really good feedback on the chat. So thank you very much, and make sure you re-watch it again on the FA Learning YouTube channel. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete.